I wriggled my hand into the thin plastic bag. The warm, soft, steaming mound of poop oozed between my plastic-sheathed fingers as I scooped up the mess from the grass. With my hand still in the bag, I casually sauntered down the street until I was close enough to my target that I could trust my aim. I stole a look around and quickly flung the pile of goopy dog shit at the windshield of the black 4Runner that was parked across the street from my house. The wet splat as it hit the glass was both satisfying and slightly nauseating. I spent a minute admiring my Jackson Pollock shit smear, and then I scampered back across the street, puppy in tow, and headed back upstairs to my apartment. This had become my morning routine. Sometimes I mix things up. Instead of throwing dog shit on the car, I'd stuff it under the door handle of the driver's side door. Or sometimes the universe would give me a gift and the window would be slightly down and I could plop that steamy number 2 right inside. Sure, it felt a little batshit crazy, maybe a little unhinged, but it also felt like I was finally standing up for myself. I was no longer willing to put up with anyone's bullshit. What had started as a casual Tinder date had developed into a whirlwind romance straight out of a sappy rom-com, complete with a trip to Hawaii, thoughtful gifts, sweet surprises, and nonstop attention. I turned to Tinder because I felt like I was running out of time to find happiness. My job ran my life. I was barreling towards my mid-30s. All of my friends were married and pumping out kids and moving to the suburbs, and I felt like I was being left behind. I'd never wanted kids, but I've always wanted a partner. And as I got older, that seemed like a harder and harder thing to find. I'd experienced a handful of disastrous Tinder dates. A guy who took his shirt off in the middle of a bar and asked me to touch his nipples. Another wanted me to meet his mom after our first night out. And still another who kept asking me if I was his unicorn. But Dan was different. Dan made me feel wanted and slathered me with attention. Basically, my primary love language. I fell fast and I fell hard, completely blinded by his love bombing. For so long, it had felt like my once robust world was shrinking, and my life often felt trivial. But Dan helped me feel like I mattered to someone. Shortly after we started dating, I learned that Dan lived across the street from me. Like, literally across the street. He didn't share this piece of information with me after I allowed him to walk me home, but he eventually told me that he could stand in his driveway and see into my second floor apartment's window. At the time, I thought this was just convenient. He carried 2 phones, but he claimed one was for work. And he kept odd hours and would often show up at my door in the middle of the night. But the late night visits made me feel special. When my friends voiced their concerns about Dan, I didn't listen. Jess, I don't think he has a real job, my friend Sam said. He does. He just can't control his schedule. When they need him to go to work, he goes, I explained. Dan had told me that he worked with a private agency that collaborated with the Border Patrol. I also think he has a kid, she said, unfazed. I found this woman on Facebook who has a daughter that looks exactly like him, and she has the same last name. It wasn't until a complete stranger slid into my DMs that I realized how gullible I had been for the better part of a year. Hi, Jess. You don't know me, but I think we are both in a relationship with the same man. Up until recently, I was also dating Dan Donaldson. I don't know anything about your relationship with him, but I can tell by the photos of you two that you are far more than friends. I'm reaching out to you because I wish someone had done the same for me and saved me a lot of time and heartache. Please let me know if you want to talk more. Amy. As I messaged with Amy, Dan's lies quickly unraveled. The long hours he worked, that was when he was dating other women. The work trips he went on, that was him traveling to Orange County to visit his daughter. The fancy job he claimed to have, he was a fucking hotel valet. I was furious. I was hurt. I was embarrassed. And honestly, I was ashamed. Was I really this stupid? Was I truly so desperate that I'd fall for any guy who made eye contact with me? I consider myself a pretty smart person. How could I have been so fucking dumb? Putting on my big girl pants, I decided I was not gonna let this shitbag get away with what he had done. Dan didn't know that I was aware of the double life he'd been leading, and I was gonna use that to my advantage. Over the course of the evening, through multiple bottles of wine and a newfound camaraderie with my friend Amy, I came up with a plan. The next day, I asked Dan if he could come over to help me with a project. Pretending to be my knight in shining armor, he hustled across the street to help me. When he came inside, I handed him my computer, which had screenshots of my conversation with Amy filling the desktop. He started reading, and his expression quickly went from cheery to confused to dark and angry. Obviously, this woman is deranged and trying to ruin what we have, he offered. I don't even know her, he floundered. Obviously, she didn't mean anything to me. She's nobody. I'm with you. That's what counts. I couldn't believe he thought he could lie his way out of this. First of all, you were with me. We're done. Second of all, she's not nobody. She's someone, a fucking human being, Dan. Women, people, are not disposable. And when I paused to take a breath, he held up his hand to stop me. I have a problem, I know. I should go to therapy. We can move past this, he begged. Fuck you, Dan. You do have a problem, but you're not my problem. I don't care what the fuck you do, but you're not going to be doing it anywhere near me, I said, and pointed to the door. Telling him off felt good, but now he was just another tick in the running list of relationships that I couldn't manage to make work. Most of my breakups resulted in me having wine for dinner and planning my cat-filled future. But with Dan, my need to fight back mounted. I refused to wallow in my misery while some shitbag didn't miss a beat hunting for another vulnerable woman as his next mark. Amy quickly became my confidant and co-conspirator as we both fantasized about our revenge against Dan. I wanted to key his car or scratch cheater across the hood. She said I should plaster signs around our neighborhood that screamed, "Beware of this man." I considered slashing his tires, but I don't own anything that sharp, and I also didn't want to go to jail. So instead, we used his address and phone number to sign him up for every obscure subscription service we could find. In our minds, he'd die a slow death under the piles of junk mail that would arrive at his door. The actual dog shit I assaulted his car with was really the only significant physical thing that I did. And pelting his porch with a collection of tacky coffee cups that he left at my house. Dan seemed to interpret my actions as an invitation back into my life. I'd look out my living room window and see him posted up in a lawn chair, staring directly at my house. And if he caught me looking, he'd wave. I'd head out the door in the morning only to find a bag of groceries outside with flowers and love notes. He'd text me asking for random favors or offering to pay me to cook him dinner. The attention from him now felt suffocating, even sinister, where it had felt sweet before. The harder I tried to extricate him from my life, the tighter he held on. My life had gone from revolving around Dan to finding ways to avoid him entirely. I traded parking spots with another resident in my complex so that my car wasn't visible from the street. I kept my blinds closed at all hours of the day. I changed my running routes and I shopped at a different grocery store. My neighbors took turns walking my dog with me, and I stopped playing volleyball with a group of our mutual friends. But no matter what I did to avoid him, he seemed to continue popping up, like a really, really tall whack-a-mole. He just won't go away, I wrote in a message to Amy one night. Get a fucking restraining order, she wrote back in all caps. As much as I wanted to be done with Dan, involving the authorities seemed extreme. I didn't want to be seen as a crazy ex-girlfriend, and I also didn't want to have to admit to strangers how easy it had been for Dan to take advantage of me. I hadn't even confessed all the details of our breakup to my friends. I felt so stupid and ashamed. I didn't want to hear the I told you so's. I wasn't afraid that he would hurt me physically. I just wanted him and the constant reminder of my desperation to vanish from my life. Amy became my champion in ways that my other friends had not. While many people would have seen the other woman as a source of competition or strife, Amy and I bonded. We reminded one another that we were better than him, that we deserved better than him. Over the course of several months, we grew close, sharing snippets of our lives. I vented to her about my fears of being incapable of a stable relationship. She opened up about her track record of cheating exes, worrying that she was an easy mark. Our conversations were peppered with updates on Dan and the latest stunts he'd pulled, but largely, we just helped each other navigate a really shitty chapter in our lives. Each time I shared my shit-smearing secrets with her, we laughed at Dan's expense, both knowing how much care he put into keeping his busted-ass forerunner spotless. While I'm certain he knew it was me turning his personal property into a literal shit show, he never addressed it. It took 6 months, an explicitly detailed email to his mom, threats of going to the police, and finally, me moving to get his harassment to stop. Amy and I continued our online friendship and even talked about meeting in person. But at the height of the pandemic, that wasn't really an option. We found solace in our shared experience, revenge fantasies, and eventually were able to celebrate more positive milestones in one another's lives. I still want to stuff steaming piles of dog shit into Dan's open car windows and under his door handles. So maybe I am a little batshit crazy and a little unhinged, but at the same time, I'd like to make sure that anyone can smell his lies from miles away, even though I couldn't.
Jessica Rogers, ladies and gentlemen. Jessica.